Hey. Hey, you guys. Welcome back to Night Shift with Andrea up late and my trusty sidekick, Brian Sanders. How are you guys doing? How are you doing, Brian?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Could not be any better.
Hey, Felony Melanie. Hey, Silly and Heaven and Liam. We got John in the chats. Hey, guys. Let us know if the audio is funny. We're using headphones for the first time in a while, but I'm very excited as to why, because that means we have an out-of-studio guest. And so I can't wait. Without much further ado, we're going to introduce him here in a moment. But if you haven't listened to last week, this show can be a standalone. Otherwise, listen to last week's episode. It was the Black Dahlia Part 1. And so, if you have listened to Night Shift, we don't often cover the kind of, sensationalized national big cases that sometimes it feels like a lot of people have already heard about. But, I'll say it again. With this one, I thought I knew a lot about it. And until you start digging, our guest will tell you he's been digging for a couple of decades now, or actually more. And it just seems as though information keeps coming. So it's very, very interesting. And so, again, this is a true crime podcast. We do have some photos that we showed a couple last week that normally we wouldn't show certain things on this show. And we didn't really give the bad ones, but just keep that kind of thing in mind. If you're here, you know what you're listening to, but just keep that in mind when you're going along about the show. And then if you are new here, this is a live YouTube show every week, but we drop in primarily are for a streaming podcast, right? So your iTunes, your Spotify, wherever you listen to your audio podcast. You got anything new this week?
I don't, except I got an episode that's going to drop
Is you dropping tomorrow? All right.
Yeah,
Do you want to give a little brief?
Yeah, real quick. Billy Bats and the Made Men, which is a punk rock band out of Atlanta. Been playing for about 4 or 5 years, but they're absolutely incredible.
Okay.
They tell a lot of funny stories, and it'll be on YouTube. It'll drop Thursday evening, but it drops tomorrow on Spotify, Apple.
Nice.
Yep.
Okay. Well, cool. Can't wait to listen to that. I was just about to say, have I? But I have not. I'm new, just like everybody else is here. All right, guys. Well, I think that we will go on and kind of get started tonight because I've got a lot of information, or someone else has a lot of information, I believe, that we're going to have to cover. But quickly, the case that's been referred to most notably as the Black Dahlia case, it's a case involving the victim, Elizabeth Short. And so she was a young woman, 22 years old, that was brutally, heinously murdered in 1947 in California. We often don't also cover cases quite that old because of all the reasons we talk about, right? At this point, a lot of things, witnesses, perpetrators, people just physically will not be around anymore to hold accountable and this kind of thing. But when evidence starts coming out as the years have gone on, and you can just really kind of pinpoint it gets very interesting. And that's exactly what we're looking at tonight. And so you remember, if you listened last week to part 1, that by the time we finished the episode, we had kind of gone over a list of like the questionable suspects at the time, right? And we talked about Mark Hansen. I believe Brian enjoyed seeing that picture of Mark Hansen with his posture standing there like that. Look, I won't even be able to have it pulled up in the amount of time I would like to do that. But we talked about Mark Hansen. We talked about the red-headed pipe clamp salesman, Robert Manley. We talked about a few of these, individuals that were in and out of Elizabeth's life, especially toward the end of it. And this is the kind of thing, there's your Mark Hansen. This is the kind of thing that, like, and I feel like we talk about it weekly, but when you have kind of multiple people who are involved in some subpar things, then it kind of makes your, casting that suspect net a little wider, and it takes a little bit longer to weed it out. But ultimately speaking, we were to get down to suspect numero uno, a certain George Hodel. And the way he was initially a suspect, I think that can't get lost in all of this, that initially, right off the rip, there's actually, I've got a printed out form somewhere right here that this has, I don't have it loaded, but this has who was the lead at the time. This was his like typed and handwritten list of like the top 20 suspects. And if you could read what it says right there, it says George Hodel is number 1. Well, that happened. Some time went by, and it was all but forgotten, it seems, until recently, just in the past couple of decades. Someone started looking into it and investigating it, and has made some quite surprising discoveries. So I will let him tell you about that. And let me go on and get him on here. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Nice to be with you on night shift.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to have you here. We've been talking about it ever since you agreed to come on. You guys, I'm gonna let this gentleman introduce himself and tell you a little bit about his background. But this is Steve Hodel, man, I'm really happy to have you here, and I can't wait to hear everything you have to say tonight. So, go on and tell the folks a little bit about your background, if you don't mind.
Okay, let's see. Born in Los Angeles in 1941, just a few weeks before the war started. Grew up there, bounced around LA with my parents, and ultimately joined the Navy at 17. 4 years in the Navy, got out, and fell in love with a beautiful Eurasian woman who was said she was 28. We'll talk about her a little bit later. Kyoko Tachibana Hodel, and fell in love with her, got married. Couldn't even marry. It was a secret marriage. She said, you can't tell your parents or anything. So we off to Twin Falls, which was the closest place where we could get married without parents' permission, and came back and was working as an orderly. I was a medical corpsman in the Navy, and was working at Kaiser Hospital. And we're having brunch one afternoon, and Keo says, "Hey, look, the police officer's making $150 more a month than you're making." And I said, "Police officer, what the hell is, what are they doing?" No, I'll pass on that. "Oh, Jack Webb, detective. That might be kind of cool." Next thing you know, I take the exam and I do well on the written, and I did the physical agility and the psych. Somehow I passed that. And next thing I know, I'm in the academy wearing a gun and a badge at, 21.
Yeah. Wow.
So my career was basically almost 24 years with LAPD. Worked 6 years in uniform patrol, different divisions. I don't know if you call them precincts back east, but we call them divisions out west. And then wound up in 1969. So I came on in 63, and in 60 worked 6 years. And then in 69, I went to detectives, worked all the different tables, juvenile, sex crimes, robbery, and ultimately gravitated to homicide. Worked 17 years in homicide at Hollywood Division detectives, and over 300 murders, solved 240 of them. And it wasn't just me, we had a really good team there in Hollywood. So we had the highest rate of all 18 divisions on clearance. So we were very proud of that.
Nice.
Yeah, had a wonderful career, 24 years, rose to Detective 3, which is the equivalent of a lieutenant, and basically retired. I had a couple of sons by then. I had divorced Keo long before that, remarried, and I got tired of the mean streets of LA in the 60s. So moved north to Washington State. The boys kind of went through high school there, middle school, high school. And fast forward to May of 1999, I get that 2 a.m. phone call. Hello, and it's my dad's wife, June. And she's hysterical. She says, "The paramedics are here. They've just pronounced your father dead. Come down." And so I flew down and did all the things you have to do with a father's passing. And basically, we're sitting there, I guess day 2, I stayed there overnight. And day 2, she says, comes out with a small photo album and says, "I think your father would want you to have this." And it's a small, like 3 by 5 inch photo album, pictures of me and my brothers and my mother. And I come to a woman kind of reclining, naked posed, half naked pose. And I said, "Who's this?" She says, says, I don't know, somebody your father knew from a long time ago. Anyway, I didn't think much of it. And to this day, well, I'll skip that part. But basically, I'm on the phone to my half-sister, Tamar. And we're talking about what a remarkable life our father had and what an amazing person he was. And she's in Hawaii and I'm in San Francisco. And so we're talking and she says, well, you know, he was the suspect in the Black Dahlia murder. And I says, what the F are you talking about, Tamar? Where in the hell is this coming from?
Right.
And she says, well, he didn't do it, but that's what the LAPD, the cops that took me to court told me. I said, well, that's ridiculous. You know, I mean, yeah, he had some problems. And if we have time, we'll talk about, she was the victim of incest.
Right. And I will clarify there, because I've tried to do my due diligence and read through almost all of your FAQs and everything that they have, which you guys will talk about that a little bit later on, kind of when we break from the case and kind of we're speaking a little bit more freely. But Steve here has compiled, I mean, immeasurable amounts of documentation, timelines, evidence, photos. You'd be blown away by it all. And it's all very organized neatly. You can find everything you need to. So I personally am more blown away by that even than anything else. You've done such a great job with that. But in saying so, I was, reading through and I was the question and answer portion where it talks about, why wouldn't she have told you this sooner? And I think that that's a misconception because is it true that you guys really weren't in that much communication at that point? And that's why this is something you had not discussed. Is that right?
In the previous 40 years, we'd had about, I'd say a maximum of 30 minutes of conversation over that 40-year period.
Right.
Keo kind of flipped out, as many victims do, got into sex, drugs, rock and roll, and had a very interesting, dramatic life of her own. Had 5 children with 5 different husbands or fathers.
Yeah.
And she really was the original hippie, I guess you could say, or she was actually pretty hippie, but she was a Earth mother and close friends with Michelle Phillips of the Mamas and Papas. And she kind of took Michelle under her wing at 14 and they went north to San Francisco and got into that whole scene up there. So she had a lot of problems in and out and had been busted for pot and stuff. And
your sister could have her own book easily. Like I have no doubt
absolutely,
about. I've read a lot between she and Fauna, like a lot of the information there. And that's its own.
It is. The bottom line is we had very little contact.
Right.
And I had gone. She went her way and I went my way, and so, but it was our same father, and it's interesting because what followed after that phone call for the next whatever, I think she remained alive. She died about five years ago. So I guess for the next 15 or 18 years, we became quite close.
Yeah.
In sharing a lot of information. But anyway, needless to say, I had never had a clue. I was very close to my father. He had 11 children by 5 different women, and I was his favorite. Go figure. Maybe I wasn't his favorite. Maybe he just wanted to stay close to me to find out what I knew or didn't know. Which
that's also true.
But anyway, so I
said, that's a great point, Steve. I didn't even this whole time haven't considered that. His thoughts on you being a police officer in that jurisdiction as time went on.
He must have thought, what does he know?
Oh my gosh. My brain didn't even land on that for some reason. Goodness gracious.
And so I said, I'll be able to show he had nothing to do with this in 20 minutes with my background experience. So, but I realized I couldn't do an absentee investigation from Washington State. And I was divorced. I was living by myself. And I thought, hey, I'll just relocate back to LA, my hometown, and clear him, and that'll be it. It'll be a few months, probably, maybe. So I moved back to LA and started digging into. I knew nothing about. I didn't even know the victim's name.
Right.
Short. I knew it was a famous whodunit. I had seen some photographs of the crime scene going through the academy. I think they had an hour class, and they were talking about one of their most famous unsolveds, the Black Dahlia, but I didn't know her name. And I can't believe that something didn't leak out. Yeah, that's the photograph. That's Dad's album, and initially we thought they were the same, and then I eliminated the one on the left. I actually located her, interviewed her, and eliminated her. They're not the same photo.
Right.
The one on the right is questionable, and we can talk about that later. Is it or isn't it her?
Right.
Regardless, I started investigating and followed. I was trained to follow the leads and the evidence, and doors kept opening, and interviews with people. There were some that were still alive and stuff. And within 2 years, it took me 180 degrees in the opposite direction, and I had actually made a very strong case against my father as being the suspect. So surprise number one was the link to the Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia. The second one, and as equally shocking, was that it was not a standalone crime, that he was a serial killer, and that there were about a dozen what I call LA lone woman murders that occurred during the 40s there, that with crime signatures and stuff, I've made very strong cases on many of them as being committed by George Hodel.
And that's something we did not touch on last week. I don't even think we got around to talking about Jean or, none of them, because I was trying to not confuse what we already had, right, with Elizabeth Short and her suitors and her amounts of, acquaintances. I was going to say friends. I'm not sure that there were a whole lot of actual really friendships she had, but the acquaintances she had, and due to some of her circumstances, I didn't want any of that to get confused. But yes, and that's something I would like for us to touch on, as we get into this tonight. You guys, there were a string of, well, I think Steve would agree, at least one other that I think he feels pretty strongly about kind of pinning on his dad. But then plenty more that have certain signatures and things like that, like we talk about every week. And another great point, I think, that I think it's important for people to listen to, because we talk on this show a lot of times, Steve, we do unresolved or unsolved. And so you would understand with your background, when we say unresolved, we mean sometimes it's just past the point. The person's passed away. There was just never enough to charge, but you kind of know the story.
Right.
And in saying that, that's led us down some, rabbit holes where we talk about, because I think the public's perception is it's really quick and easy to say, oh, it's corruption. And, and Brian will explain often how, okay, it's very likely not corruption. It's very difficult to have corruption on multiple levels, right? The amount of people who have their hands in a case and how many people would have to be on board with being corrupt, it just often doesn't happen, but it can. And so then we run into cases where, oh, but it did. Or sometimes it's just inexperience, and where like a benign ignorance or inexperience can cause something to be squandered, and sometimes that gets into something more malignant. And so it's just kind of interesting. Sometimes when they're unsolved, you don't know how much of which one of those things it could be. But he'll always say, you take what you've got. And you speak to this if you want. I didn't know if the echoing was an issue, or if it was harder for you to.
No, it only echoes
when we speak.
when because we're right here.
Imagine that.
So I'm just over here working the audio like a DJ, just up and down.
Okay. Well, just how you always talk about taking evidence and take what you have and working it through. And so I know, Steve, that you've received some pushback from people who have said, that either you have confirmation bias or tunnel vision with this, or you just needed it to be. But at every point I've read your interviews where you say, no, actually, a point was to clear him. And that's what we always talk about. If you work at the opposite, you work at to clear somebody.
Right. At
every turn. And if you can't, you can't, right. And then especially if evidence is taking you precisely elsewhere, like you said, at a 180.
Yeah. And probably your listeners might be interested in, I spend about the first third of my book, Black Dahlia Avenger, the original book, on Dad's amazing biography. And probably your listeners, I might take 5 minutes to give you a quick rundown, because it's just so incredible. and as I say, I had tremendous respect for my father. He was a remarkable individual. Let's just do a quick bio on him.
Yeah, he's got a crazy, extensive background.
Born in Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles, Clara Barton Hospital in 1907. At age 5, he's taken, his mother takes him, his mother and father were Russian Jews who met and married in Paris, came through Ellis Island at the turn of the century, and then basically came out to LA, had one son, George. And George was a child prodigy. He played piano concerts at the age of 9 at the Shrine Auditorium. He was intellectually highly gifted, tested. He was one of, there's a famous study by Professor Terman from Stanford of high IQs in California. And he was one of what they call Terman's termites. He was part of the study, 186 IQ, 1 point above Einstein. That skips a generation. My boys are in good shape. And so highly intelligent. He went to Caltech Institute at age 14, and also sexually precocious. Had an affair with a professor's wife, got her pregnant, broke up her marriage. She went back east. George, at whatever 15, 16, follows her back, says, "I love you. I want to marry you." And the professor's wife says, "George, you're a child yourself. Get out of my life." So he comes back east. He comes back to LA, starts driving cab, strangely enough, with a young guy that's going to law school by the name of William Parker, who will eventually become our most famous police chief. They're driving cab together in the 20s in LA. He then becomes a crime reporter, lies about his age, says he's 21, and becomes a crime reporter for the LA Record, which was one of the big LA newspapers. Starts riding around with LAPD Vice, busting doors, and the judge with the young blonde gets arrested, and he's writing these sort of tabloid stories in the newspaper. Then he graduates and starts running around with LAPD Homicide and writing bloody ace of diamonds next to the body and this sort of thing. And then after about a year and a half or so, he starts dating with another of his close friends, John Huston. Now, you may know John Huston from, then he was just the son of Walter Huston, a famous actor, but John would eventually become a very famous film director and make a lot of famous movies, classics, including The Maltese Falcon. And so basically they're buddies, and they're double dating. And John Huston is dating a woman by the name of Emilia, and Dad is dating a woman by the name of Dorothy. Well, after a month or so, they switch, and Dorothy falls in love with Huston. They run off and get married, and Dad looks at Emilia and says, "Guess it's you and me, babe." She gets pregnant. They go north. He goes through he goes through Oakland for his pre-med. Also starts working as a columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle newspaper up there. And again, also driving cab. This is now we're to Depression years. Mm-hmm. And goes across the bay, gets his medical license, graduates, gets his MD from San Francisco, UCSF, does a year of intern there. He then has another affair with another woman, she has a son named Duncan, and then he has an affair with another woman while he's still there in San Francisco, and Tamar is born in 1935. He leaves, life is too complicated, so he leaves the women and the children, and off he goes and he becomes a surgeon at a logging camp in Arizona, New Mexico area. And then he becomes works the reservations, Hopi Navajo reservations for a while. Then he comes back to Los Angeles, and he hires on with LA County Health Department. hooks back up with Dorothy, this original Dorothy, who's now been married to Houston for 7 years. She leaves him. They get married. My older brother Mike comes along in 39. I'm born in 41. I was a twin, but my twin didn't make it, John. And my younger brother Kelvin is born in 42. Dad quickly rises to the top, becomes the LA County Health Department chief of the health department, and he's kind of he specializes in venereal disease control. So
which is very important, listeners. Keep that in mind, what he's saying here.
He is. He becomes the VD czar for all of Los Angeles. And fitting his position, he decides to buy a very iconic house in Hollywood known as the Sowden House. You got a picture of that?
Yeah.
And we all move into the Sowden House in the mid 40s, 40, 45, 46. And it's really cool. It's magic time for us. I
can't imagine. It's an insane house, you guys. I'm about to put it up. And for our audio listeners, as always, I will put all of these pictures up on Instagram on the Andrea Up Late channel. And so if you're, like I said, if you're just listening on Spotify or iTunes or something like that, you can always hop over there and see them. So, and I'm sure that these are maybe more recent. Steve, I'm not sure, but I've seen them from.
Yeah, these are renovated, but.
Yeah.
The structure is the same. The walls and all are the same.
It is an incredible house. And the structure, when he speaks on that, and this will become a lot more relevant, and you'll understand why later. If you can look at this photo, let's say here, it looks a little blurry. If you look at the archway in the back there, and actually even just any of the structure there, it's concrete and it's blocks. It's like if a child were to make like block over block over block to make a fortress of a home. Is what that is. And there you can see some more of the block there. Yeah, would that be like the front? Is that like the front entrance?
That's the front entrance. And the home was built in 1926 by Frank Lloyd Wright Jr., son of Frank Lloyd Wright, Lloyd Wright. And
incredible.
Yeah, it really was. And it was magic time for us. We were the three little princes. Mom was the queen. Dad was the king. Parties, cocktail parties. And it was just a wonderful time for us. And then in 1950, unbeknownst to us, all we know is actually the stuff hit the fan, but we didn't really know it. And all we knew was Dad was gone. We moved, the house was sold. We moved out in 50 and we were with Mom. And that was what I call the gypsy years, where we kind of bounced around all over LA, and Dad was left the country.
Yeah.
And let's see if we can wind up with his bio. So he leaves the country. He goes to Hawaii and becomes a doctor. He's actually a psychiatrist now, and he's treating the criminally insane at the state hospital there it was a territory then. And then he goes on to the Philippines, marries a very wealthy Filipino woman, has 4 more children, gets into market research. Becomes the leading expert throughout Asia in market research. He's in 20 countries, divorces his wife after about 4 or 5 years and 4 children, and hooks up with his secretary, June, in Japan, and they become an item for the rest of his life. For the next 30 years, they eventually marry and move back he relocates after all of this. He relocates back to San Francisco in 1990. So for the last decade of his life, he died in 99. So for the last decade, we become quite close for the first time. I go down to San Francisco and see him. He comes up to Bellingham, Washington to visit me. And he was never a warm fuzzy, don't get me wrong.
Sure. Well, that sometimes comes also with that high intellect. We talk about emotional quotients versus, intelligence quotients.
Exactly. But anyway, he tried. And again, I was his, he really didn't have any contact with any of his other children to speak of, with the exception of Duncan, who was still alive and living in near San Francisco in Daly City. So he would see him on occasion. But basically, I was kind of the mouthpiece for him. And during my career as a cop, during the 60s, 70s, 80s, he would come into town, I would get that phone call, and he would say, "Hello, Stephen. This is your father speaking." He would say, "Get your brothers together, and we'll have dinner. I'm only here for a few hours. I'm leaving over, And it was a last minute thing. So
take it or leave it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd get the brothers, and we'd go out, and I remember what I described this in the book one time. So we all go out to Century City, where he's staying he and June are staying, and he says, "Well, let's go upstairs and have a drink." So we go up to his room, and my two brothers and I are sitting there, and he says, "All right, now," he says, "let's see. I want each of you to take 2 minutes and update me on your life." And he said, "Michael, you're the oldest. Let's start with you." With that, I kind of got up, says, "I'll be down in the bar." That's the kind of what, he was very awkward. He just didn't know how to deal with. Anyway, so then I get that 2 a.m. phone call in 1999, June. She's hysterical. "Come down. Your paramedics are here. Your father's just passed away." I go down, take care of all the things you have to do. His last request is no funeral, no words spoken. Cremate me and throw my ashes in, or put my ashes in the San Francisco Bay. So she does that, and that's when the next night I get the album. So that's kind of his life. It was a very remarkable individual. I mean, it's really sad, because he could have cured cancer. He could have done so much. For good for humanity, and and we can, maybe if we have time, we can talk about maybe what I think are some of the causes, but that's kind of different. So
anyway. My brain starts going, and it's not necessarily important right this moment, but like I said at the end, I keep making my notes for at the end, because I wanted to ask you, about his relationship with his mom, like when coming up and things like that as well. So you get the album, you're looking through, your sister that you've not had a lot of contact or really any contact with in decades and decades, says you're commiserating over your dad's death, and then she says, he was suspect number 1 in the Black Dahlia case, in Elizabeth Short's murder. And you say, "What are you talking about?" And you told us you go back to LA, you're like, this is crazy. You worked, that was your career. And so you look into it and you set out to clear his name. And in fact, it goes, like you said, the opposite way. So, correct me if I'm wrong here. I feel like the next big thing doesn't really happen until, was it the 2003 with the vault, or were you starting to get steadily some information leading up to that time?
No, actually, before we even got into the vault, I had made it enough of a case, and I went in secret to an active head deputy district attorney, Stephen Kay. And I submitted the evidence, and I said, "Take a look at it, review it, and let me know what you think." So he took about 3 months, reviewed it, and he came back after reviewing everything and all of the evidence. And in fact, I have a short 20-second tape. Do you want to hear what he said from his own mouth?
I've heard it. I'd like for them to hear his view of your evidence.
Let's see if this works. See if you can hear this.
Okay.
I have no doubt in my mind that George Hodel murdered both Elizabeth Short and Jean French. And were he alive today, and were the witnesses alive, I would have no problem in filing 2 counts of murder against Dr. George Hodel. And I believe if I took that case in front of a jury, that I would convict him.
You hear that?
I did hear that. And listeners, did you hear he said 2 counts of murder? Right. So would you like to inform them on what he's talking about there?
So much to my surprise, as I'm looking into the initial murder, I find out that actually the newspapers came out and said have connected it, and the police actually connected it to a second murder that occurred a short time later. And her name was Jean French. And she was an ex-nurse, and basically her body was found about 5 miles west of the Dahlia crime scene on a vacant lot, posed carefully, nude. She wasn't and I'm sure your listeners already know that Elizabeth Short was surgically bisected from your first program, part 1. And And at that time, of course, the LAPD was convinced that it was a skilled surgeon. It wasn't just some hack job. Anyway, she was not bisected, but she was posed carefully, and the killer had written BD on her torso in lipstick, and of course the paper said that must have stood for, and the police said that stands for Black Dahlia, the murder that was committed just a short time earlier. And actually, it had profound.
I was gonna say it said FU, right? Like
FUBD.
Mm-hmm. And you guys, if you want to look into that one, I want Steve to keep talking about it, but on your own, you can even just simply Google the red lipstick murder, and that's what you can start finding stuff about Jean French. But yes, please continue.
Right. So they were sure that it was most likely linked to the Dahlia crime, and that's what Kay is talking about when he reviewed all of my evidence on both investigations. He said, there's enough here to file on both victims in court. So that's what he was referring to as victim number 2, the second count, Jean French. And of course, when I looked at, it was enough of a shock to learn that Dad had actually killed Elizabeth Short. But then the second huge shock was he was a serial killer.
Yeah, so that was my next question for you. Actually, was just like, I can't, it sounds silly. And when I hear people ask someone a question like, how did that make you feel? I mean, good grief. Like, come on, of course, I can't imagine. But like the investigator in you had to have felt like, well, like when Steve K backs up, your thoughts here, you had to, okay, like, I'm kind of like, okay, I am right? Like, I'm not crazy. I'm looking into this, yes, like this makes sense. But then you do have to reconcile the fact that, you're speaking about your dad here.
Right.
And just kind of trying to align that with your memories, with growing up, and, with any of your other thoughts. And so did you ever have, when you got, and I'm not trying to put the cart ahead of the horse here, but when you started finding out more and more information and really learn more and more into which we'll get into, but I mean, when I say that, jokingly, last week, one of our listeners had said something like, don't ruin Man Ray for me. And I was like, oh, ruined, ruined. And I was and I told him, I said, well, I feel like I'm going to ruin a bunch of artists for folks tonight, because when I started getting into the rabbit hole of just, that's its own episode as well. Almost. I want us to talk about some of it tonight, but I was blown away looking into the depths of all of that. So I guess let me ask you, once you started learning some more of these things and having more conversations with Tamar at length, about her history and things like that, could you then as an adult start to see things that maybe, caused your radar to kind of peak when, kind of go off when you were, coming up earlier on, that it's your dad, so you wouldn't, have thought anymore about anything?
Well, so I've got two situations here. I've got a son who loves his father and is confident he'll clear his name. And you've got the trained objective detective following the evidence, keeping it separate. So you've got these two individuals, so to speak, going in parallel directions. And but the evidence, for example, when I saw the handwriting on the body on Jean French, I recognized it as my father's handwriting.
Right.
He has a very distinct block printing that I also recognized it. And I can't remember if you covered this. I think you did last part 1, but the killer sent in a bunch of notes, cut and pasted,
right,
handwritten and stuff. And on one of them, most of them were cut and paste, and handwriting was disguised. But on the one note where he says, turning myself in on January 29th, had my fun at the police, signed Black Dahlia Avenger. That was undisguised, and I recognized my father's handwriting. And initially, as a son, I was saying, what is he doing? Is he pretending to be the killer?
Yeah.
It part denial, and for people, and there's a lot of naysayers out there say, oh, it's a daddy dearest, it's all fantasy. And in a way, I can understand them, because, if you went to
wild.
Yeah, it's just the son of the serial killer grows up to be a homicide detective. It's just almost, the mind is almost too it's hard to grasp. Let me put it mildly.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then there's the Jean French, and then I find out there's we won't have time to discuss all the others, but there's about 8 or 10 additional murders.
Mm-hmm.
And I put together the crime signatures on them, and they're very unique. I mean,
would that be is it 11 points of interest that you had mentioned in one of your FAQs, or was that from the police department?
That was the police department.
Okay.
They were connected, and they came up with 11 points. But basically, in all my 300 murder investigations, I never had one where the suspect mailed a note to the police and to the press, and he regularly, in many of these, not just Black Dahlia, but so many of the others, sending taunting notes, catch me if you can, this sort of thing, turning myself in, all sorts of taunting things, very unusual crime signature. So basically, the book comes out in 2000. So once the DA, Steve K, gave me his confirmation, said, okay, I'll go ahead and write this up and publish a book. Had he come out with saying, Steve, it's interesting, not enough, I would have gone back to Bellingham. I had no dreams of being a writer. I'd go back to Bellingham and say, okay, well, I guess we'll never know. But that's not what happened. So
right.
The Avenger comes out. It becomes a New York Times bestseller. A lot of sensational headlines and stuff, and a lot of interviews and stuff. And then basically, for the last 20 years, I've been there are 9 books out, and the evidence is it's like Brian, it's like a homicide progress report that you write.
Mm-hmm.
One ongoing investigation.
Yeah.
But it's out of country, I discover there's a copycat murder in Manila, Lucilla Lalu, she's bisected. The other thing that's also, of course, the other thing is we knew that the suspect was a surgeon. I mean, that wasn't like he was a meat cutter or,
right.
He was a skilled surgeon, and they came out and the doctors I interviewed said, I'm a surgeon and I couldn't do as neat a job as was done here.
No, it is incredible in that sense, the way her body appeared. And I think that's why, and I'm with you, we're very much like-minded with you in the sense of I've read where you've spoken about, not sensationalizing something, not, just that clickbait or just that horrible picture to make somebody. And we're the same way. I think the only other one that I did show that was tough to look at was, Michelle, the girl in Germany through the exorcism, because that was, it was tough, but you almost have to see her face to understand what the case was about, like to understand what happened there. And it's kind of that way with Dahlia. Like we showed some kind of a blurrier version of, the crime scene photos, if you will, right. But just you can hear all day long that she was bisected or she was cut in half and hear these details. But to see the unnatural, I think the fact that we are going to couple it then with the artistry, with the fine art and these very well-known through the decades, we're talking like Picasso level, guys. We're talking like a Dali, a Man Ray. We're talking things like that. And when we see the interwoven pieces of some of these artworks versus the way her body was displayed, that's one of the only reasons I will show some of the more kind of a little bit fuzzier photos of it, just so you can even see the similarities there, because it will blow your mind. Now, let me ask you this quickly, and then we can move off of Jean French. But so for the lipstick murder, did I read correctly? Now, did she also have the Glasgow? Did she also have her mouth lacerated or no?
No. There was no surgical cuttings on her, but the body was posed, and the lipstick, and he carefully took her. She was nude, and he took her clothing and put it over the writing, over the lipstick on the body.
Okay.
So when the police got there, they just saw clothing on it, and of course, when they removed the clothing, they saw this message. And so again, it's posing. It's very dramatic.
And the visibility, she was near a road as well, right?
Right, and that figures into one of his most prominent crime signatures, which I don't know. I guess we have time. Basically,
we've got as much time. This is night shift, Mr. Hodel. We've got as much time as you have.
Okay. Well, basically, one of the crime signatures that really jumped out at me, and for your listeners, the crimes were not limited to Los Angeles. Once I got into it, I mean, there's a reason there are 9 books, and basically, starting with these 40s crimes, I actually then went to. They took me, literally led me to 3 crimes in Chicago, which were called the Lipstick Murders.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those 3, there were 3 murders, 2 adult women and a little girl by the name of Suzanne Degnan, who was 6 years old, 6 or 8, 6, I think. And she was kidnapped, and her body was surgically bisected, and that was a hemicorporectomy, and divided between. And the only way you can divide the body without cutting through with a saw is going between the 2nd and 3rd lumbar vertebrae. And that's a specific procedure called a hemicorporectomy. And a lot of my naysayers said, hey, that wasn't even invented until the 1950s. He couldn't have known about that. Well, they're wrong. The fact is
the 30s, right?
Well, this life-saving procedure was in the 50s, but he did a lot of autopsies during his medical training. He had 755 hours of surgery training, and he did a dozen autopsies. So the only way the way they divided the body back in the 30s was by cutting between doing this. It wasn't called a hemicorporectomy back then, but the procedure was the same. They cut between the 2nd and 3rd lumbar vertebrae to divide the corpse. So it wasn't a life-saving operation back then, but it was used to divide corpse, and that, of course,
for autopsies.
Yeah. So anyway, so she was this little girl was kidnapped. Her body parts were hidden throughout the city, and basically the remain. They wound up arresting a young man who was going to college for it. No trial or anything, and Chicago PD was not known for their honesty back then. I mean, it was a whole different world, as was LA. And
we tried to touch on that some last week as well, with the payouts and the all kinds of things. Yeah.
So, but her body was posed off a street called Hollywood, okay, in a sewer, and after the bisection and other parts were spread, and I thought, well, that's interesting, coincidental. Dad was a Hollywood physician and surgeon, but come on, Steve, you don't need to go there. So then but then I realized that Elizabeth Short's body is posed off a street named Degnan. Well, I'd never even heard the name Degnan before, and I'm still thinking, well, come on, Steve, that's still coincidence. So then I get to the French murder, and her body is posed off a street named Mountain View. Well, Mountain View is the funeral cemetery where Elizabeth Short was buried just 2 weeks before. And I was like, wait a minute, what's happening here? And then I get to Lucilla Lalou in Manila, and her body is posed off a street named Zodiac. And I'm saying, oh, no, there's no way. I mean, come on, Steve. And I didn't know, and we won't talk about Zodiac tonight, but because a lot of people say, where's he going next? The grassy knoll, I mean, it's like, come on, Steve. But just quick, and just for your listeners, I'll just say this. So I didn't know anything about Zodiac. We had Manson down here. We had our own problems during those months in '69. Anyway, I thought, well, at least I'm obligated to take a look. So I look at it, and what do I discover? I didn't basically there are 2 more composites. Everybody's familiar with the first one, a young guy. But I said, there's no way, the guy was way too young to be George Hodel. So then I get these. I discovered 2 more composites. I don't know if you can see these. Can you?
Yeah.
See? Okay.
Yes.
So I mean the one composite.
I've seen the ones on the bottom.
Yeah. So, and the one is picture perfect to George Hodel. Okay. Now these are both artists that actually went up and interviewed witnesses on the Zodiac
Mm-hmm.
and did these additional. So, and then I find out that the original officer, the best witness of all, changes the age from, he makes it much older. He says, well, he was more like late 40s. Okay, well, Dad was 60, but
Mm-hmm.
he could easily pass for mid to late 40s.
Yeah.
So anyway, that started me down those rabbit holes, and we won't go into that now. But basically, it's the streets that are connected, and that's, he's leaving these clues. And then there's the whole surrealist aspect, which we can talk about maybe.
Yes. Actually, before we get to the art,
Mm-hmm.
If you don't mind, so just quickly for our listeners, if you listen to part 1, you do know that, like we spoke about, with her body being bisected there, just below the navel, really, she was cut horizontally. Her body was just over a foot apart, as in the top portion, the bottom portion. Legs splayed, arms over her head tilted to the side. Okay, a very distinct way she was lying there. She also had certain incisions. Certain pieces of her tissue had been removed and then inserted into her vagina. Her right nipple was missing. We're going to talk about that moving forward when we talk about art as well. But like Steve was just saying, all of the cuts were surgical in nature, and I think I equated it last week to the game operation, without making it lighthearted at all. But like when you look at the physical game operation that children play, the hole is there where the bones are that you reach in. And so, for instance, where the tissue was missing over her left knee on her thigh there, on the frontal aspect of her thigh, that's what it looked like. Like, it didn't look like someone took time with this. And there was such a surgical precision there that's why initially they went through, and I forget, Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it was like 200, however many people were in school there. Because one of the first thoughts was, oh, this is someone studying to become a surgeon. So they went to the college, to the med students, right, that were studying, and spoke with a bunch of them. But that initially, right off the rip, this was the thought. This was kind of the direction as to who we're looking at as a suspect. Now, we know that her body was drained of blood. There was no blood, and that was one of the things that made this scene, it made it so odd. Her body was clean. It had been scrubbed, like with actual like bristles. 2 or 3 bristles were recovered from having been scrubbed. And so whoever did this took great time and great care to have everything just so. And again, while a bloody scene isn't good to look at, there's something even more unsettling, I think, and more unnatural about a body looking like this with no blood whatsoever around. That's kind of part of the reason I think these photos are so haunting as well. It's just odd. The lady who, the poor woman, because I've thought about this often, that happened upon Elizabeth's body that morning with her daughter, thought she was looking at a mannequin that had been disassembled. That's how this appeared. And so that kind of gives you, if you didn't listen to part 1, just a brief explanation. Her face, she did have blunt force trauma and just some other things, bruising, and she went through a lot prior to her actual murder. But in saying that to you, something that has been on my mind, and I had held myself off from asking you in our email transmissions the past couple of weeks because I wanted to ask you here, but in your home there, the Franklin home, was there, and I tried not to talk about points that you talk about because I wanted you to be able to say all of them tonight. But one thing, just so we don't spend a lot of time on it, would be that when people wonder how, if she were kept for 2 days or, 3 days, 1 day, 2 days, for any amount of hours and held, because we know she was bound, she had ligature marks. How could that have been done at your home, with 3 little boys running around and a mom? And I believe you've said you guys were out visiting your uncle for a few days during that time period. Is that correct?
3 weeks, actually. We were
3 weeks. Okay.
away during that period. Dad had the house by himself. And before we come back to that, let me just say one thing. You can see this. There are three. I'll just read to you. There are 3 major myths on the Black Dahlia case. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
And the first one is that missing week. There was no missing week. I was able to come up with 14 witnesses that saw her every day of that week.
Okay.
Missing week. 7 of them knew her personally, so they couldn't have been mistaken.
Okay.
So that's the first myth, was the missing week. Second is it was a standalone murder, none before, none after. We've discussed a little bit that it was not a standalone, and never from the get-go was believed to be a standalone. And then the third big myth is the case was never solved. And we'll get into that. The case was solved and it was covered up. And we'll get into all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But so those are the three major myths. And as far as the kidnap, she was actually last seen by a police officer, Mary McBride, who was working downtown on the 14th of January, literally hours before her body was posed the next day.
So do you think it was like an overnight situation? I mean, just like, a few hours being held.
That's right.
Okay.
She was kidnapped. McBride she came running out in the early afternoon downtown LA from a bar and said, "There's a man that's threatening to kill me." And McBride walked back in the bar with her, and the man was gone. She got her purse and said, "Thank you, I appreciate it." And that was that. And then about 3 hours later, around 5 o'clock, McBride's still working her beat downtown, and she looks up and she sees her come out with 2 men from another bar with 2 men and a woman. And she goes over and says, "Are you okay? Is everything okay?" And she says, "Yeah, I'm going to go meet my father at the bus depot," which was a block away. And so she was last seen about 5 o'clock on the 14th with 2 men and a woman. And so as I present the case, it's my belief that she was taken to the Franklin house. And experts estimate the torture probably lasted about 4 hours.
Okay.
And the courtyard was not as you showed the pictures. There was no pool there. It was just a flat courtyard with dirt and cacti. So a lot of people think I believe it happened in the basement. I believe it happened in the center courtyard.
So that's my question to you was there a place for any drainage capabilities or anything like that in the residence as it was at the time?
Yes, and I believe that the actual bisection, the hemicorporectomy, was done in the bathtub in the master bathroom, which was just literally 25 feet from the courtyard.
Okay.
So I believe she was tortured. Of course, we know that her hands and feet and neck were bound, and she basically was tortured. Some of it was while she was still alive. Some of it was dead. I believe a photo was before she was, cut up. I believe she was either unconscious or dead, and I believe that my father took a picture of her in the living room, and I present the evidence of why I believe it's there. And
do you think that that's the photo in the album?
Yes, I believe that is.
I'm going to pull that back up as we're on that real quick, because I will say that part of me, so you guys, if you're watching, he's already identified the woman on the left. It is not Elizabeth Short, and it is not the same as the woman on the right of this album. Right. The woman on the right, I know you still maintain as Elizabeth, and maybe it is. My brain isn't making me make her mouth look the same, but at the same time, my first thought, I told Brian, I said, she doesn't look alive. Whoever this, even if it's not Elizabeth, to me, this woman, it doesn't look like someone in like a state of repose or like, posing for the photo or even sleeping. Her mouth looks odd. And I do wonder if that's because there had been some trauma. Because the makeup, the lipstick on her mouth does not look, I don't know, right.
Excellent point. Let me address that. That's an excellent point. Good observation. You should be a big city detective.
I'm married into it.
I believe that the lipstick was not applied by her, but was applied by my father. And it's smudgy. It's much. A woman doesn't put lipstick on like that. And again, it's part of his tableau, his masterpiece. Mm-hmm. She's dead. He's, and I believe it's in representation of Man Ray's Léon Marais, the lover's lips.
Oh, here we are.
Exactly. And that's in my first book, I present this along with the Minotaur, which is a nude woman bisected at the waist.
I got you, Steve.
Hands above her head. Which is also a man. This is a Man Ray photograph from the 30s. I think.
Right. I thought I had the Minotaur lined up. If I don't, I'll definitely put it on Instagram.
Anyway, it's a female body. It's a photograph by Man Ray, and it's a female body. She's hands above her head, posed exactly as Elizabeth Short was, and bisected at the waist. And I believe those two photographs were inspiration for George, along with a lot of other stuff I came up with later. But were the initial inspiration for him. And I think he saw himself, and he was a surrealist in his own mind, and in a way he's out surrealing the surrealist in this. It's his masterpiece. His scalpel is his paintbrush. Her body is the canvas.
Well, let me ask you this then for our listeners. Could you just give a little bit of the backstory? I'm actually loading up Minotaur now. For our listeners about kind of the coming up, like you coming up in that home and like the artistry, the parties, you touched on it earlier. We definitely have like a high level of like a socialite situation. And then we want to kind of also, for sure, because I think it's huge in this case, speak on, go back to the, when you called your dad the VD czar, the venereal disease doctor, if you will, between that and some of these abortion, clinic services he was offering that provided a lot of, obviously there were stigmas. So there were things that people in very high ranking positions wouldn't want or need the public to know. And we know from George's own mouth in the tapes from the house that he was, he's already paid off a DA, right? We just know that these things were already taking place. And so if you have certain celebrities, very, very accomplished artists, well-respected people of the community. I mean, when he's talking about a Houston of the world at the time, I mean, these were really big names. But then we can, like I said, also get over into the police department. They were also being treated for venereal diseases, but that also means that your dad would have their names. They don't want that out there, or any of the higher ups in law enforcement or in judiciary positions within the community. So I guess take that however you want, or, whichever direction you want to go in with it now, Steve, and, to kind of explain some of his connections there.
Yeah, of course. Remember now, as we've talked about a little bit earlier, that he grew up with the department in the sense that as a young reporter, he was riding around in buddies with these young detectives, and who would go through the 20s, 30s, and 40s and become the top brass. So he was with these guys all through. So he had a lot of information on a lot of them. Abortion, of course, abortions were a felony back then. You went to prison in the 40s, and right. He was performing. He had a private First Street clinic that he worked at after he was no longer the VD czar. He had his own private practice downtown, and he had his office downtown. He had a First Street clinic downtown, and we learned from the tapes that a lot of the people were going to him to have, if their girlfriend got in trouble or something. So right. He was performing abortions for the rich and famous, and a lot of these high politicos, not only cops, but people of power and stuff. He was in that circle. And he had a lot of secret information on a lot of people.
Exactly.
And this is, the basis ultimately for the whole cover up. And let's see. So do we want to go to the surrealism, or do we want to go?
Yeah, I mean, I'm ready. To our art fans, buckle up. But yeah.
So Man Ray, a lot of your listeners may or may not be familiar with Man Ray. He was one of the leading surrealists in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. And in 1940, he left Paris. He was actually born in Philadelphia, but he went as a young man. He went to Paris and was living there for a long time. Then, just before the war broke out, he came back in 1940. He came back to the States, and he was in Hollywood for 10 years, and from 1940 to 1950. He and George hooked up kindred spirits from the get-go. And surrealism, of course, is a pretty bizarre study in itself. They believe that there's no difference between the dream state and the waking state. So, you can fly, you can kill, you can do anything you want, nothing matters. And Dad, being a misogynist who not only hated the world and women, a misanthrope, was also a frustrated artist. He loved being with and around this type of thinker, and they came to the house. He became very good friends with Man Ray, and Man Ray took a lot. I have a lot of photographs of Man Ray, family photographs. He was literally our family photographer, and
that's wild.
Let's see if you can see that. Here's the first sketch that Man Ray did when he came to Hollywood in 1940. Let's see. Can you see this?
Oh yeah. Oh God bless.
Yeah, that's the first sketch that Man Ray did. So again, free thinkers.
Yeah, could you send that to me later? I'll try to find it, but can you send it to me and I'll put that up as well?
Sure. Yeah. And now I'm not saying that Man Ray was involved in the actual murder. I have nothing that would establish that. I do know, and stay tuned, because I'll be presenting some new evidence that actually links him to an actual definite knowledge post.
Okay.
And actually, he says so in his artwork. He actually, it's pretty amazing. So anyway, they were good buddies, and but where Man Ray and William Copley was another surrealist friend in Hollywood, who actually helped Man Ray. He opened up a art studio and presented all of Man Ray's works. But nothing really caught fire here back then with Man Ray. Now his paintings are worth millions of dollars, but back then he was just a kind of he had a reputation in Paris for being a great surrealist artist, but here not so much. It didn't really connect with Californians. And anyway, so they became good buddies, very close and kindred spirits. And I believe that Dad was inspired and was paying homage to Man Ray in the lover's lips, and also in the Minotaur, and later I came up with additional linkage.
The surrealism, and then but I think coupled with like the sexual proclivities that seem to be running amok in that group, more so than I realized. Like when I was reading more about Dahlia, when I was reading more about even like Man Ray's, actually, I think I get this from your FAQs, but Man Ray's, his own account of like his first sexual experience. And you guys can find it if you want to, but very long story short, he was 16 and the little girl that he was in a room with was 9, but he also brought his young 9-year-old, I believe, brother along with him. And it goes just as you can imagine from there, but that was him kind of chortling and recounting, to someone asking what his first experience was. And it just didn't seem to be like a stance of like shame or regret. And I think that winds up being, and we can speak on it later, but, when we talk about like the abortions, that is leading up to and including your sister, Tamar, correct? And that's a whole separate issue. When we talk about, I was going to ask you, when you were talking about the officer, Mary, is that the same Mary that had the report from, I believe, Lillian, who had the little boy, George, when they were talking? Or is that a different Mary?
Well, that's a different officer that was in Santa Barbara.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think they were both named Mary, so I wondered. Yeah. But either way, so this is far reaching, you guys, like so much farther than just, Steve found some evidence and thinks his dad did this. There's a reason he's been continuing to investigate this, because there's been so many rocks to uncover. I think that it's just wild. Yeah. But back to the artistry, I tell you, the Minotaur is widely talked about, and for good measure. But there's this one we showed last week. Let's see. Now this one was painted. This was a Man Ray, but it was post Elizabeth's death.
Yes.
And I mean, okay. Which now that wouldn't be a stretch. I told Brian, I was like, these guys are so, interesting, if you will, with their art. But, I could see him fully saying, yes, that was an homage to the Dahlia that was found, and being completely open about it. But let me tell you, the one that blows my mind the most, that the second I landed on it, I made a note on what it's called because the name is so wild. So this would have been, you guys, I'm going to show you a picture of Elizabeth, but she's covered with the blanket. Just so you can kind of, again, gather the position of her body. This will mean a lot more to you if you saw her without the blanket. But this artwork by Man Ray was in 1929 called The Primacy of Matter Over Thought. And to me, this one blows my mind because it reminds me so the way he blends, and you guys, I'm not going to bore you with an art lesson if you're not interested, but one of the things Man Ray really got into was photography and like light work. And so he went from all of his paintings to then also really working strongly in photography. And so that was the one that I just put up now was a photograph of a woman, a nude woman lying on her back. Legs were very similar, arm over her head. But the way he used shadow work and light work, it kind of makes her look like she's melted into the floor, which I've said to Brian a million times. When you look at Dahlia's pictures, since there was no blood and she was posed the way she was, it looks deflated. It looks, a human body just can look odd when it's not living, and this is a particular instance of that. And the way the waist of that lady in the photograph is like kind of shown to you, it's presented a certain way because of the light and shadows. It looks as though almost she could have been bisected. And so that one to me is as closely resembling of Dahlia, in fact, as the Minotaur in my brain, but because it's just odd.
And we have there's another photograph of his wife, Juliet Man Ray.
Yes.
They're very close friends to my mom. And she's laying on a couch below a body that's bisected in half with, I believe the arms are up in the Minotaur position. Her arms are in the Minotaur position, and she's laying on the couch. Again, there's so much reference to symbolism to this. I believe that the body was bisected in the tub in the master bathroom, and drained of blood, washed clean. And then one of the key points is that I would come to discover in my later books is that I discovered I went to research the Frank Lloyd Wright Jr. at the UCLA Academy, and I went to, and they have a whole, in the special collections department, they have a whole folder on him, and you have to go in and put on gloves and sit down and do the whole thing. And I'm going through there and looking at his architecture and stuff. And there's a folder inside there that says George Hodel. And I open that up, and it's got receipts for cement bags and manure that were used, that Dad paid him for $500 while he was in China, actually. But he owned, I forget the year on this, but anyway, he had work done at the house. Cement work done. And the date I looked at the date on the receipt, and it's January 10th during her so-called missing week. And these, as you just have shown, these cement sacks are cement and manure at the crime scene. And LAPD confirmed that they were used to transport her body from an unknown, probably private residence, they said, to the crime scene, and left there, and then the body was posed. Well, not only is that startling, but I said manure sack. Well, in the autopsy, we discovered that she was actually force-fed feces, which I believe was manure from that sack, in her stomach. It was found in her stomach during it. And there was a unknown green substance also there. Well, this sack that was there, it was a fertilite sack. And fertilite were small green pellets that they put in to enhance growth. So I'm sure that was the fertilite. I think that, part of her torture and stuff was being force fed the manure. So
Yeah.
that was a major linkage,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well, then
we get into the tapes and all of that if you want to.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to say. So if you want to move it to where, move us up to the vault, I guess, and your discovery with that, when was it a New York Times or an LA Times, an LA Times reporter that came?
Yeah.
Okay.
A reporter on his own. So he interviewed me and did 2 or 3 articles when the book first came out. First one was kind of like, I think this is all kind of imaginary. The second one was a lot more objective and said, well, hey, maybe he's right on this, because what he did was he went to LAPD and says, hey, there's this. I had gone to Steve, I'm blanking on his last name.
Steve K?
No, Steve, reporter, Steve Lopez. So I go to Steve Lopez and I said, hey, I'm coming out with this book. I think, it's pretty historical, interesting to LA. You might want to take a look. So I gave him a copy, which he read 3 or 4 days before the book came out. And then he came out with these articles, basically saying he's claiming his daddy did it and stuff. Well, he goes to LAPD and says, hey, Hodel, Black Dahlia, he thinks his daddy did it. And LAPD says, we don't talk about unsolved cases, go away. He says, okay. So he goes to the DA and to the actual DA, Steve Cooley. A lot of Steves in the story.
All the Steves. Yeah, a lot of Steves.
And he tells him, hey, Hodel. And Cooley says, well, I'm not spending time in a 40, 50-year-old case. And he said, well, there is a file on the Black Dahlia in my vault downstairs. Would you like to see that? Cases. Yeah. So they go down, open the vault, and he takes out this box of Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, gives it to Kay. Kay comes up, goes upstairs to the office, sits down, opens it up. Out falls a picture of Dr. George Hill Hodel. He goes, whoa, he was a suspect. So he does he was a columnist for the LA Times, and he had his own column. So it was he does a couple of back-to-back quick and dirty articles on it and says, hey, well, maybe apparently LAPD bugged Hodel's house and he was a suspect and but a very kind of light, quick and dirty, nothing really. So I go down and I sit to Cooley and I say, hey, can I see these? And he says, well, I let him, I guess I should let you. So I spent the entire day copying all of these transcripts, probably 800 pages of material, of different files, related. Lieutenant Jemison was and what do I discover? I go back and I spend 3 or 4 months reviewing all of this. And basically, what do I discover? I discover that a case was actually taken away from LAPD and you got to remember back then in the late 40s, well, throughout the 30s and 40s, LAPD was a corrupt department. I mean, there were a lot of payoffs, and there were a lot of good cops, but there were some bad cops, and you don't need a lot of bad cops to have payoffs on a department. So anyway, and mostly these were higher ups. These were guys that had risen to the top. Anyway, so I basically discovered that all of these tapes and transcripts, that what they did was they went out, and they picked up George Hodel and they took him downtown and said, we want to talk to you. And while he's downtown, they break into our Franklin house, the Sutton house, and they put not bugs on the telephone, but they put actual live mics in the walls.
Love that part of the story.
In the bedroom, in his master bedroom, in the living room, and they wire it, and they run the wire to the basement, and then up with the telephone lines, and they run those to Hollywood detectives, and they sit in the basement for the next 6 weeks, monitoring 24/7 Dad's conversations. And where do they do this? The place where I worked for 17 years in homicide. They're sitting in the basement listening to these. So
isn't that crazy? I can't imagine. Yeah, I just can't imagine you later, like all the things that you've had to kind of process thinking about just like that. Like I was in and out of that building every day, and that's where they had been, prior to that.
Right.
It was 1950, right? When that was going on?
That was 1950. So
okay.
Years after the murder. And so, so they do these tape recordings, and these transcripts aren't actual. I mean, they're verbatim, but what they're doing is they're writing down, summarizing the content.
Okay.
So we've got 146 pages of transcript, but these are not. I mean, the tape. We don't have the tapes. And
right.
Guess what? The tapes have disappeared. So what happens is, after 6 weeks, and this is all being headed by the guy with the white hat in this is Lieutenant Jemison, Frank Jemison of the DA's office. And he's the good guy in our story, and he's great. Yeah, he's getting all this information, and he's basically solved it, and he's got the cop out from George. So 6 weeks into it, the DA at the time says to him, all right, you're off the case. I want you to shut everything down. I want you to turn all of the tapes and everything over to LAPD, to Chief Thad Brown, Detective. He was Chief of Detectives, Thad Brown. And shut it down. You're off the case. So he does it. And it turns over everything to Thad Brown, personally hands it to him as ordered, and all of his investigation and stuff. But what he does do, and nobody knew for 50 years, is he keeps a second set of books, and he locks them away, this transcript of George Hodel.
But at the DA, guys, with the DA, not with LAPD.
No, he locks them away in the DA vault. And that's what we discover 55 years later are the transcripts. Now, all of the LAPD stuff's disappeared. All of the wire recordings, there was nothing in the LAPD files to name George Hodel as a victim. They had no idea. When I went to them and briefed them, I gave them a briefing before publication.
Yeah.
With the draft and stuff. And they had no idea that these George Hodel even existed. I mean, that's how clean everything was.
To that point, if you don't mind, I actually am taking I'm going to read your own research back to everybody. But I've got the list here of the actual evidence that had been gone, like that we wound up realizing is missing from the LAPD. And so when he talks about Jemison, first of all, not to bury the lead, we didn't really talk on that much, but like remember what he just said. Jemison was told, okay, that's it. You're done. We're not moving forward with this. Like, scoot it along somewhere. Like, hand us over all your stuff, whatever. So that in of itself is, that's a problem. But either way, like he said, Jemison made a copy of everything, stored it in the DA vault, and moved right along like he was instructed. But what we realized later, and I'm just going to go on and just read the bullet point list, if that's okay with you, Steve, of the missing evidence. And so it's going to be the original address book that belonged to Elizabeth. And if you remember that the suspect mailed that in, that's the one that has, I believe, Mark Hansen's name on it, or Henson.
No, the address book is not missing. They have that in evidence. Oh,
they do? Okay. Well, it was on this little bullet point. So, okay, let me take that off of there then. Her own identification papers and the photos that were sent in by the suspect. And then it says here her purse and shoes that belonged to her that they found on that dumpster, I guess, right? A couple days later.
Well, they actually found them they were placed on the dumpster by him on his way home from the crime scene, from the vacant lot,
right,
halfway home. And then they were picked up by the trash guy and they were taken to a dump site. And they got the information. So they were actually technically recovered from a dump site.
Gotcha. So, but they are still missing from evidence. Is that right?
I believe so. I'm not sure about that.
Actually. Okay. Well, this list just has like the black hair, basically anything. I think the point is anything that would then potentially have evidence or DNA evidence on it. So, like the black hair follicles that belong to the suspect. The actual original notes that were mailed from the suspect to press and police, are those missing as well?
Most of them are. I think there might be a few that they have, but
okay.
And
them. Then like George's fingerprint cards from his, arrest and from
Right.
his licensing.
Yeah.
And then let's see here. Oh, the formal interview with Maddie Comfort.
We never we never knew about that until we got into the DA files.
Gotcha. There's just, either way, there's a whole lot of things that could have just been in one box, and I think Steve's touched on it, and things can be misplaced or missigned out, or whatever, misassigned, if you will. But these things have never been recovered. A lot of the original physical evidence from the LAPD.
Right, and going from prime suspect with, and basically let's do a quick and dirty on what he confesses to over the 6-week period. Shall I read some of these?
Oh, please do. And this would be in the tapes that Steve was just referencing. Again, these were hooked up to like a hard line, guys, like a hard line. Mike's put in the house to Bell Towers, right? I believe it was to like.
To the telephone lines, and then they were to the Hollywood detectives, and they were, recorded there. But the tapes are gone. But we have the transcript that Jemison locked away in the DA's vault. So here's basically statements that he made from these recordings that the officers recorded. And again, these are not phone taps. A lot of people say, oh, they were phone taps. They were not. He suspected his phones were tapped, but they weren't tapped. He thought they might be, and he mentioned, I need to go outside. I think my phones are tapped. But he had no clue that they were wired for sound.
Golly.
This is so here he's talking to a Baron Haringa, who's a friend of his. He says, this is the best payoff I've seen between law enforcement agencies. Yes, you do not have the right connections at the DA's office. Don't confess ever. And then he goes on to say, supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia. They couldn't prove it. Now they can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead. Well, I lay out a strong case that he killed his overdosed his secretary a year and a half earlier. And she would have known. And I also make a case that he's very likely, there's another suspect on their list that's the downtown unknown doctor that treated her. She had a Bartholin gland cyst. And I believe that was George Hodel. FBI were over to see me 3 weeks ago. Well, anyway, she hasn't said she committed the incest or killed the Black Dahlia. Don't say anything on the phone. It's tapped. I have your phone number. I'll have to go out and call you. They're probably watching me. Don't you think we could hire some girls to find out what they're doing? I'm in trouble, Black Dahlia. And the mention of a passport. Please have my picture of me, and I thought I had destroyed all of them. So I don't know if that's a picture that we're talking about here or another picture. And then he talks about killing his secretary, Ruth Spalding, which would have been 2 years prior. He says, put a pillow over her head and covered her with a blanket. Got a taxi, called Georgia Street receiving hospital right away, expired at 12:39. They thought there was something fishy. Anyway, maybe now they have figured it out. Maybe I did kill my secretary. So, I mean, these are some very damning statements, and obviously, and the most surprising and to me, probably shocking part of discovery of the transcripts was there's a section where he's talking to this Baron Haringa. And then they go downstairs.
Yes.
And the detectives are saying, went to the basement. And then they hear blows. A woman screams. More blows. A woman screams again. And I'm reading this, and these guys are sitting at Hollywood Station, and it's like they're 7 minutes away from the house. Why aren't they out the door over there and doing a rescue? They do nothing. Now, I've said to myself, okay, let me see. As a supervisor, what's my answer to this? It's only day 3 of the stakeout. They don't want to blow their cover. Maybe they figured it was some kind of kinky sex or something, or, whatever justified. Maybe they called Jemison and said, hey, what do? We don't want to blow the cover. Maybe he wasn't reachable. For whatever reason, they do nothing. And, that alone is enough to, I think, to get rid of it.
Yeah, and am I mistaken when I read that in that same time period with the woman, hearing the thud of the blows and her scream, was this I don't know, is the source accurate that she also was attempting to call the operator before that happened? Yes,
before that, she's heard upstairs talking, and she sounds drugged or she sounds intoxicated.
Right.
She tries to call the operator, and she's unable to. Clearly, she's trying to call for help.
Right. So my question would be: Do we know of any reported missing women at that same time, or any of the lone female victims? Were any of them found around that same time that, like, this lady would have been in the basement?
At that time, LA was known as the port of missing persons.
Okay.
So, it would be just
Who
another,
knows?
because they do ask her, does your husband know you're here? So, clearly, I'm sure she just went as a missing, never connected to anything, along with the hundreds of others.
Right.
We don't know who she is, or, whatever.
That, and then asking about the drainage at the Franklin house were two of my bigger questions this whole time. Okay. Yeah. So what about, do you want to speak to the German guy?
Haringa?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean,
did anything ever come of him later, or?
Yeah, he was he left the country. He went to, I'm trying to remember if it was South America or forget where he went, and he just kind of disappeared. But before that, he was an art dealer. He had a studio downtown next to the Biltmore, and he was I think just another, probably one of the boys, one of Dad's surrealist friends, and I forget. He just kind of disappeared. I did meet and talk to his son, which he didn't know anything about anything, but it was interesting to meet his.
You're like, neither did I, buddy. Actually.
Yeah, right. And,
so is it right that during that same time with the wiretaps or the bugging of the house, that George made mention something about the DA breathing down his neck, and he might have to get on out?
Well, he talks about, he clearly makes it clear that they suspect him of a crime.
Because it was soon after that he left, right? That was that same...
Right, same year, 1950. And so, basically, he's in the wind. He's gone to Hawaii territory. I'm sure LAPD was thankful that he was gone, and that, they had no intention of looking for him, even though Jemison had made a prosecutable case, and was I actually presented an article where he was about to go to the DA and get a filing on a warrant, and of course that was all covered up. And Thad Brown plays an important role in my later books. He's a young lieutenant on LAPD in the 20s and 30s, and obviously would have known and befriended George as a young reporter, and so, like I say, as Thad Brown rose in the ranks of LAPD, George rose in the Hollywood scene, and so at the end, Dad had a hell of a lot on Thad Brown. And there are other murders, child murders, that I go into I call it the early years, and there are set of two books. The 1920s is about, I think, a dozen or 5 or 6 crimes. The 1930s is about 12 crimes. There's he and probably Fred Sexton, who we haven't talked about much, was likely a they were friends. Houston, Sexton, and Dad were all friends from their late teens forward.
Mm-hmm.
So he was involved, did murders on his own, and also was involved with George in a lot of these early murders. And ironically, he was an artist of some renown in LA. He had.
That's why I made that face when you were talking about the Maltese Falcon earlier, right?
Right. He created in 1940, when it was one, he made the Maltese Falcon that was used in the movie for John.
Like the actual, you guys like the actual, like.
Yeah, which just sold, I think,
prop
a few years ago for $5 million.
Mm-hmm. The most expensive, I think it was the most expensive movie prop sold was that one.
Yeah.
And he was a bad dude, guys. So he self-admittedly was involved in the molestation of his own daughter. And please correct me if I'm wrong here. From the time she was, I believe, 8 to 11. At some point, he gets a divorce, gets remarried, winds up being involved in the molestation of his stepdaughter. And am I mistaken when I think of your sister, when I think of Tamar? Did she recount him being present when things were happening to her?
He was one of the participants in the.
It was men and women, correct?
In the bedroom, there were 2 women.
Yeah.
Fred and George. It was and Tamar. So, and he took a plea. He testified against George, took a plea. He actually had sex with Tamar, so he got statutory rape, but he pled guilty to, I think, contributing to a delinquency of a minor or something in trade for his testimony, which he gave. And of course, that was all rigged too. And Dad had the best attorney in town, a guy named Jerry Get Me Geisler. And Jerry Geisler was, defended all the top Hollywood stars. And got most of them off, and Dad was no exception. They turned Tamar into painted her as a liar and a pathological liar, and ridiculed her. And interestingly, and this never surfaced anywhere until I came across an article in the newspaper when I'm doing all my research, and I'm reading this article, and it's about the trial and Dad, which it was a fairly sensational thing back then.
Yeah.
Head of LA County, on trial for incest. And I'm reading the testimony, and it says, and this Neeb, who was another top attorney and the partner of Geisler at the time, is cross-examining Tamar on the stand. And he says to her, "Isn't it true, Tamar, that you claimed that your father was the Black Dahlia killer, and that he's threatened to kill you and the rest of the family, and you're terrified of him?" And of course, as ridiculous as this, and of course, Tamar's no, she says no.
She's a kid, yeah.
So and a lot of people say she said that. She never said it. The attorney said it, as if, he said, "Isn't it true?" She said no. And so anyway, he beat the trial and leaves for, parts east, and basically starts a whole new life in Hawaii, then the Philippines, and ultimately comes back after a long and prosperous life. And
so let me ask you, what was your, I know you started to speak on it right when we first started the show, but I guess, did your mom seem to have an inkling? Did you hear any whispers from adults? Like, did you have any idea why your dad left, especially when you said, like, you guys were, kings of the castle, like little princess running around with these, socialite parties, and everything just seemed so grand, and then he's just suddenly so gone.
No, no explanation. It was just that, your dad's gone, and we're gonna pick up, and she put us in military school initially, right then. So we were there for just, I forget how, 6 months or something. Then she picks us up, and we move out to a little dusty town near Palm Springs called Rancho Mirage, which is a huge place now. Anyway, back then it was just a tumbleweed town.
Mm-hmm.
And then we bounced around. Mom was a serious alcoholic.
Okay.
She was smarter than both John and George put together. Brilliant woman, beautiful woman. I think you've seen pictures of her, and a wannabe screenwriter, never really did anything to speak of. And I talk about the gypsy years where we just bounced around, about the time the rent came due, we'd be moving out to somewhere else.
Yeah.
So, but we never had a clue. She, of course, took her secrets, and she knew, no doubt in my mind, she knew everything.
Okay.
In fact, I believe that she was, the two men and a woman that picked up Elizabeth.
Yeah.
I believe that was Dorothy, Sexton, and George.
So, and that's what I was gonna, and not to implicate your mother with what went on with Tamar, but there is a striking similarity there when Tamar recounts Sexton, George, and then the two women. And then we know that when Elizabeth was picked up, it was, herself and another woman, and then the two men. But either way, and that's something that we talk about often on the show. It's, it's very unlikely most of the time that, 2, 3, 5 people are culpable in something, because over time, or if so, it's not going to go unsolved forever and ever in a certain kind of way. Or people will know what, somebody's going to break, someone's going to speak. It just, the probability of that is so small. But if we're talking about 1940s LA into 1950, and just exactly what you mentioned with the local, cops, lawyers, judges, and then these people were quite literally above the law. I mean, they had the money, the power, the status, and the secrets, and so if no one's pressing them, and if at any turn they know that it's their get out of jail free card, quite literally, is to either just throw cash at the problem, or, like you said a moment ago, hire girls to figure out the answers from them. Like if they know they have an out, then, no, people aren't talking. And I can only imagine, people are drugging and boozing and sexing. And I think they could have done anything. And I think they kind of could, right. And did. Well, so this is a situation where it could be more than one person.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, Dad had Mom by the short hairs, in the sense that on the murder of his secretary.
She was there. Was your mother not there?
Well, he overdoses her at her apartment. Actually, George, they were lovers. The secretary and he had an affair, and they broke up. And she was bummed about it. And she was going to she had 2 sets of manuscripts, one with real names, one with phony names, and she was going to reveal this. And George, she called up George and said, "I'm going to tell on you," and blah blah blah. And this was probably for the abortions, or who knows what she knew. Or it could have been that it was Elizabeth Short. It could have been a combination. Anyway, he sweet talks her and says, "No, baby, I want to get back with you. I want to take you to Santa Barbara. We're going to get back together. I'm on my way over." So he goes over to her apartment, which was just a few blocks from downtown office, and basically overdoses her, forces her Seconal pills. Or he may have given her a shot. I don't know which, but whatever, she's unconscious. And he calls Mother, and who's at the Franklin house, the Sound house, and says, "Hey, come down right away. Take a cab." She didn't drive. "Take a cab and come right over, and I want to give you something." So she comes down. She goes up, and Ruth is still breathing. She's alive, clearly. And he says, "She'll be all right. I'm just going to watch her. She overdosed. Take these and burn them." We had an incinerator at the house, inside the house. And he says, don't look at them. Don't, just burn them. So she did. She got back in the cab, went back, burned them. So now he's got her as an accomplice of murder. And he says, I'm sure he said to her, "Look, if I go down, you're going with me. And those kids are going to raised by who knows who, but you're going to jail with me." So, and he also I talk about early years, and because they were together back in the 30s forward. So, and I believe she was on other crimes with him so I see her as more of she was a victim in her own right, and terrified of him. He clearly said, "I'll kill you and the children," and she knew he would do it. So she took it to her grave. She took these secrets to her grave. I never had a clue of anything. So we've got that, that working against her, all along.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Is it, and this isn't anything we have to talk about at length, and I'm going to ask you 2 or 3 just more questions that I've got here that we may or may not have covered just yet. Now, is it true that when George passed away, you know how it is, if someone writes something incorrectly the first time, it just gets repeated over and over. And so I'd read something from one of the sources mentioning that he had taken a fatal dose of some medication he had. Is that what took place?
Yeah, he wrote he committed suicide.
Okay.
And it wasn't out of remorse for anything he'd done. It was he was failing. He was 91 years old.
Mm-hmm.
His ticker was about to go. He went in for a procedure, I think they call it retroversion or something, where they try and electroshock and get the heart back to right.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't work. And so basically he wrote a suicide note, which is basically, I actually printed the note. I didn't realize it was a suicide note at the time, but it reflections I actually print it in the book. And he wrote a prescription for Seconal. He still was a doctor for June, his wife. And when she saved up enough, he overdosed and took his life.
Okay.
And it's listed as a heart thing because he's 91 and
well, technically, I mean,
yeah, there was no reason for an autopsy,
Yeah.
And so the doctor, and he had a bad heart, so the doctor just, said died of a heart attack.
And did he also ask her to get rid of, like when he had said like no funeral? To get rid of his belongings.
He said burn everything.
Now, do you know if I mean, I know she gave you the album, but do you know what all she did get rid of, or okay?
Once I got the album, and that started me. We haven't. Obviously, I'm sure she probably hates me.
She's not in the same. I mean, for our listeners, as you heard, as he was given his dad's bio, his dad was not only one that fancied the ladies, he was virile. He had a lot of children with a lot of women. And so you've got different people in different parts of his life, and quite literally in different parts of the world, that don't all subscribe to Steve's investigation of George. And I mean, that's hard pills to swallow. And I think that if they can go to bed at night and feel like, well, it's, like the current cops haven't said that he did it, so he didn't do it. Right. Like I'm just going to say that you're wrong, Steve. And they, so I think that June's probably in that same camp as well. Right. Like that's,
and they were married 30 years.
Yeah.
And she was very much in love with him. And they were she was younger. She's younger than me. So, there was 40 years difference in their ages. So she became basically a caretaker. And we were she and I developed a quite a close relationship during the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. One of the interesting things about psychopaths is they don't really get humor. They don't understand humor. Sure. And I use humor in my communications a lot. Same. And we would be together and I would say something and he would look at June. He wouldn't understand what I'm saying. And she would translate my humor to him,
Yeah.
So she became like the translator between the two of us. And we became actually quite close until the shit hit the fan.
Sure. Understandably so, I guess. And in saying that, quickly, do you also want to, speaking of an age difference, would you like to, and I'm probably going to butcher her name, was it Kia or Kaya?
Keo,
yeah. You started to speak on it at the beginning, but I think this might blow their minds as well.
So I'm this young sailor just home from the sea, totally in lust with this beautiful woman. She was an actress, half Scotch.
Yes, she was.
Half Scotch, half Saki, and just gorgeous, long black hair to the bottom of her butt. And I was just totally, and of all people to introduce, my mom introduced me. We went to a drinking party at her house, and back then I was a heavy drinker. I drank a lot in the Navy, and as basically as Brian would know, most homicide detectives are usually pretty heavy drinkers too, and I was no exception. So haven't had a drink in 25 years, but I knew if I started this and kept my 8 scotches a night, I wouldn't be able to do it. So I meet her at this party with my mom, and just totally enchanted with her. And she's coming on to me, and she was a astrologer to the stars, right? Along with her many gifts, she was a musician and an actress and an astrologer, and quite a good astrologer. And Jane Russell used to come to her classes with, and anyway, and she's flirting with me at the party, and she says, "So what sign are you?" I'm a Scorpio. Oh, I love Scorpios, on and on, and she says, "Can I do your chart?" And I said, "Sure, you can do my chart. You can do anything you want." Anyway, that started it, and like I said, we quickly got married in secret in Twin Falls, Idaho, and I was with her 3 very fiery years. We bought a mansion up in Laurel Canyon, which is on the hills of Hollywood, and basically, I was going to college, junior, my 2-year AA degree, get my AA. I was going to LACC, and so one night I was off to school, and I thought, well, I'll have a drink before I go to school, and it was in the evening. And I go into the bar, and I have 1, then I have 2, then I have 3, then I have 4, and I thought, to hell with it, I'm not going to school. I'm gonna go home. So I turn around and I go back up the hill, and we had 100 steps up to this mansion that we bought, beautiful home. And I climb the steps, and I get up, and I look through, and I see a fire in the big fireplace. And I see Kia lying nude in the living room, and a man lying next to her. So I got my gun on too, right? So I go through the door and into the living room, and he jumps up and he did have his pants on, but he didn't have his shirt on. And he grabs his shirt. He says, "Oh." Keo says, "This isn't what you think it is." And I take out my gun, and I'm pointing it at this guy. I says, "You son of a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
You're screwing my wife." He says, No. He says, I'm an actor too. He says, a very handsome young man, And he says, it was a part I have in a part, and we were just practicing it and stuff. And I almost I forget, was it 6 pounds trigger? 2 pounds
5.5 pounds.
I was about 1.5 pounds, and I thought, I said, "Get the F out of my house now." So he splits out. He's down the steps and into the wind, and that starts us arguing and stuff. And we go into the kitchen, and she's making some hot tea, and she throws the hot tea on me and stuff. Anyway, I said, "I'm out of here." So she was also teaching piano. So the next day she goes to teach piano, and I said, "I'm out of here." And I pack up my stuff, a couple of suitcases, and I go into her room, and I said, "She's got my chart." I said, "To hell with that, I'm going to get my chart." So I actually force open this drawer, and I get my chart. Well, her chart's right next to mine, on my chart's on top of hers. And I look at it, and she was born August 4th, 1920. 1920. So she's 21, 22 years younger than me, older than me.
Older, yeah.
Yeah, so she's 40 something, and I'm 20 something.
And you thought didn't you think she was 28? I believe, is that right?
And she looked 28.
Yeah.
And so that was a big shocker to me. So then I go home, and I talk to my mom, and I tell her this. She says, "Oh my God, you were married to Keo." Well, it turns out Keo was a young lover of my father's in the early 40s. So you've got, how twisted can this be? The son was, if you went to a movie guy and said, "Hey, here's my story," he'd say, "Get the hell out of here."
Yeah. Look, I was waiting for you to say, and that young man was Paul Newman or something. I don't know.
Warren Beatty.
Some actor.
No, but he was good looking. I'll say that word.
Oh my God. Let me see real quick some highlights that I'm gonna read. I think these are your words, so correct me if they're not. That's just a quick little excerpt where you speak on the maid you guys had growing up and how she eventually became homeless, kind of like a bag lady type over the years on the streets of LA. But evidently in the 1970s, at some point returned to the Franklin house and informed who was then the current owner that this was a, quote, house of evil. And in the decades preceding her death, evidently she was saying that, like in the 40s, her life there, she slept with a lot of LA politicos, the movers and the shakers, if you will. But because she was kind of quirky and eccentric, she was kind of written off as, like she was a liar and she was kind of discredited.
Well, that was Ellen, and she was the maid, and she's on the tapes, and she was clearly having a sexual intercourse with my dad on the tapes. And you see they have written on the tapes, George just got another BJ from Ellen,
Look, I will tell you, 1940s police reporting is wild. When I've been going back reading, maybe this makes me want to go back and look at older cases. One of them, I think, on this list of suspects, I'm reading through it, and it starts, of course, I told you I started the show with it, George Hodel, and it goes on Mark Hansen, all the Marvin Margolis, Michael Anthony, and then number 16 was just queer woman, and then it says unknown. And I think that's when they were saying that for a little while they were thinking potentially, like one of the offshoot theories was that it could have been a woman that was spurned and whatever. But it's like in the documented list of suspects. One of them here says in reference to Connie, talking about Ann Toth's friend Connie. And number 11 here, and this would be like their kind of interview of Connie Starr. And it's kind of, it's bullet pointed, it's numerical order here. And it says number 11, Connie's moral reputation is not too good. And that's like one of the file, just it's comical sometimes to go back and read the way the things are worded.
Well, in regards to that list, there's actually, I believe that George is mentioned 3 times on that list.
Oh, probably so.
Well, he's the unknown Chicago police officer.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
He and Elizabeth Short are, and she was identified by an actual witness that I interviewed, who was an usher at this. They went to a radio show on Sunset Boulevard, and they were standing in line, and George went up and pulled a badge, and it was a Chicago police officer's badge, and he IDs himself to the usher and says, "Can we cut the line?" And he says, "Sure, we do that for police officers." So Elizabeth and he cut the line. They go in and watch the radio show, listen to the radio show. Well, I believe he told Elizabeth that he was a Chicago police officer working on the red lipstick murders.
Well, and that would make sense because she seemed to have a proclivity for, not it's the same, but it's a uniformed position in the sense of soldiers and whatnot. That seemed to be who she was tending to spend more time with.
Well, but more than that, in the DA files, she goes back to Chicago, and she's actually investigating the Degnan murder, and she's with reporters. She's actually, they say she's sleeping with reporters and asking about information. She says she knows a Chicago police officer. So it all links together.
Okay, so I knew she spent time in Chicago. I had no idea that that's what she was doing. Now, is your supposition there that she was, because we know that they've said she slept around a lot when she was not doing that. And so do you think she actually was doing that? Or do you think she was doing that at the behest of George, like he mentioned on the tapes about getting women to find out if they were onto him in LA? No. Okay.
No, I think that they said she was sleeping with these guys.
Okay.
They admitted it. So I have to believe it. And she wasn't a tramp. She wasn't, but sure. I think she slept with men when she felt it was necessary. Anyway, I think that she told them that she knew a Chicago police officer working on the Degnan case. So I think that was, she didn't, no name, but I think that was, she really believed George was a policeman working on the case, or some kind of who knows what kind of a story. One of the things about George you got to understand was, in addition to his absolute monster side, he had sweet, charming. I mean, he was so.
Oh, he had to have, right? Yeah.
Women loved him. Every woman he ever met fell in love with him. And
I'm sure he was a chameleon, right? Like,
absolutely, he was a charming, and he could talk on any subject, and it was just, he was good looking and wealthy, not super wealthy. There are a lot of misconceptions when people talk about us and the house, like all the sex parties. That wasn't happening. Cocktail parties were happening, but there wasn't like sex all over the place and stuff. There may have been in bedrooms and stuff, but us kids, we weren't aware of any of that.
Right.
And so there are a lot of misconceptions. And his, very wealthy. He spent it as quick as he made it. Let me put it that way.
Well, for the women that he was entertaining, it at least probably appeared that way, right? Like they at least probably had the idea.
He appeared very wealthy and had that image, and I'm sure all of his friends thought he was well off. But in fact,
I wanted to show, but my problem here is that on this photo, I'm afraid it's in grid form, and these are on a little thumbnail here on the side, so it's hard for me to see what all it. And I think when I downloaded it, it also includes a photo of Elizabeth a little bit more up close than I would prefer. But it's the is it Duchamp? Am I going to say it wrong? Always, right? The
Tante Donné, the Duchamp.
Yeah, with the touch. What is it? Please touch. The one that's
the other one. That's the breast.
Yes.
Big-sized breast. Yeah.
Yes. And so it's actually, you guys, it's artwork that, I mean, it looks like if you were to remove the skin from a breast and put it on a wooden plaque. That's what the piece of art looks like. But again, it's just another reference from the surrealism to Elizabeth's corpse, because she was, of course, missing that part.
To be clear, that her right breast was completely excised, and it was never recovered from the crime scene.
Okay, and the images that we've seen, it looks like it's probably hard to tell at that angle. It looks like you can see a little bit of a concave portion, so it's hard to tell if it was just the skin gone or the actual tissue as well.
It was the complete breast was removed, and very much like the Duchamp picture you see. And it was never recovered. I think he kept it as a trophy, and it was buried. And we haven't even talked about the cadaver dog and the finding of the soil at the Franklin house, and that was contained human remains. Positive.
You can tell him.
Well, I got a call from I think it was a psychic show or something, and they were doing a filming at the Sowden house. They said, can we interview you? And I said, no, I want to stick to the facts. I don't want to mix, psychic with the other, and they said, well, we're having a cadaver dog here to search the house for human remains. I said, oh, well, in that case, I said, I'll involve myself in that. I'll come and I'll be with you on that. So I went and I met the Paul. Why am I blanking on Paul's name? Sorry, Paul.
No.
I can't believe it. To be 80 again, let me tell you.
We've gone through a lot of names tonight, to be fair.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And a lot of decades.
I do remember the dog's name, Buster. And so Paul and Buster met me out front, and the film crew, and they said, okay, well, we're just going to follow Buster. So Paul gives him the command alert, and Buster takes off up the steps, and we're actually below the base. At street level, we're actually below the basement because it's up on the hill. He takes off and he goes and he alerts at a vent in the basement on the corner of the exterior of the house. Go, whoa. So we go in, and these dogs are trained. They don't alert on dead rats or anything, or possums, just human remains.
Right.
So we go into the basement, and he alerts at 4 different spots in the basement, positive for human remains. So we've got that. So then we collect soil samples, and eventually they're analyzed by a Dr. Arpad Voss. I can remember his name, but and Dr. Voss is with the body farm out in, I forget which state that is, Kentucky.
Knoxville, anyway, Tennessee has one.
It's in Tennessee, and he comes back positive for human remains with the soil samples. And then we have a note where the night from the original Lieutenant Jemison investigation, where they were investigating to see if there were any bodies in the basement, and they had a plumber they interviewed, and I actually found this documentation in the DA files, and they asked the plumber, "Did you see any graves in the basement?" And he says, "No, I wasn't looking for graves. I just fixed the plumbing." And so you've got the dog, you've got Jemison, and then you've got Arpad Voss, all confirming that at some point there were human remains in the basement, or it could have been, there were some exterior alerts too, so it's hard to know.
And tell me, you might have, and I apologize if you mentioned it at the beginning, what year was that with the dogs?
Well, that's a good year. This was like 2018 or 20.
Okay, like in the last decade.
Yeah, right. And so that was big. And then of course we've got the Martin letter, which was discovered, and where we've got the undercover LAPD guy, that Martin, who's working undercover, and he's a friend of George's, and he writes out this death basically as a death note confession. In the case of actually it wasn't the case of his death, it was in the case of one of his daughter's deaths, and he writes out that the killer, he knew he was working undercover to get corrupt cops and stuff for LAPD guys, and he was working with George undercover, and he lays him out as a killer. He says, GH, you figure it out who he's talking about. And George is on trial for the incest, so everybody believes George is going to prison. So he says, but in case of the death of either one of my daughters, to be opened. And then he writes out and lays out the whole story of how George killed Elizabeth Short, and he killed another woman, Louise Springer, who's one of the lone woman murders.
Mm-hmm.
We both knew Springer, and George killed her too. And he lays out this 3-page note, and he seals it. Well, nothing happens to his daughters, so the note's never opened until his granddaughter, 55 years later, finds this letter sealed, opens it up, reads it, calls me, sends me the note, and that's included in one of my follow-ups. So you've got an undercover LAPD guy laying out George back in 1949.
It's incredible. And I mean, and I can't stress this enough to people when I said, like, I kind of thought I knew what there was to know about the Dahlia. I mean, enough, right? Like enough. And it's wild. It's wild. And I can't commend you enough. You guys, I will on Instagram, I'll also give Steve's info out in the sense of do you have 9 books under your belt now?
Yeah. And just let me cover 2 more quick points.
Oh, please do. Please do. I'm not in any hurry to wrap this up.
One point is in regards to a lot of people say, and questionably, I mean, I agree. It's like, is this or isn't this a photo of Elizabeth Short?
Do you mean pull it back up? I can do that.
Half the world believes it is, half the world believes it isn't. Okay. So what I did was I contacted the top facial recognition lab in Germany, and I sent them the photographs the photograph, and they did a comparison, and they came back with a 95 to 97% probability that it is Elizabeth Short. Now, you need a 99.7% to say it's positive. So, but that's very, they were hugely surprised that it was that high. And so we have that confirmation. And here's the other point. Whether it is or isn't is really kind of irrelevant at this point.
True.
Because we have the DA file saying they knew each other and they dated. We have this actually in Jemison. In his interview, we have documented that they knew each other.
Oh, yep. Yeah, I thought about that earlier. Okay, so Brian just made a note. So one thing, so Steve, this you may regret coming on here because this is what happens as soon as we were about to wrap it up. It's like, so one more thing.
Okay.
But when we talk about the artistry, this realism, all of the players and all of this, I mean, for giggles, let me give you one picture of Alice Cooper and Salvador Dali. We got some of that happening, but that's beside the point. When we look at Elizabeth's corpse, and I touched on it last week, but we talked about the cross hatching, and I'm sure there's probably some other word for it. That was the word I learned for it in terms of an art technique. And that would be, to any listeners, that would be like, multiple diagonal lines and then switch it and do multiple diagonal lines in the other direction. I think I also equated it to like a steak on the grill when you move it and you get those crisscross lines.
Right.
And it's called cross hatching. Well, on Elizabeth's body, we know that was done to the piece of skin on her thigh, I believe, right up on her hip.
Yes.
That was then removed and put into her vagina. And then on what's called just anatomically is the pubic mound, but it's where your pubic hair would be. She had been shaved, and that was also put inside of her. But what was left on that area of skin was cross hatching. And I had said to Brian before, I wonder if, is that symbolic of hair? And then, we can go down a rabbit hole of how much of it is symbolic, how much of it is not, whatever. But would that be symbolic of hair where hair would otherwise have been? But then when you look at Elizabeth's face and you see the Glasgow smile cut in, it would be the right side of her face above her right lip was what looks like more cross hatching when you look closely. And so then
there are 5 vertical lines on the upper lip.
Is that what it is? Okay. And so when you see that, I didn't know, I'd said to him, and that's what I've been doing. One of the things I've been doing when I probably could have been spending my time doing something else is pouring through all that artwork from all those guys to try to find something of a woman where maybe she had like a half of a mustache or something like that, because that's what that looks like to me. And maybe that was just practice. Maybe that was nothing. Maybe it's not symbolic. I don't know. But in this photo here of the woman on the right, when we were talking about her lipstick being applied too heavily, it doesn't look right. Again, I kind of keep going back to this. This woman doesn't look alive to me. Maybe she is. I don't know. I think if it's Elizabeth Short, I definitely don't think she's alive.
Right.
Because her face, things are doing things too weird to be alive. If that's a very scientific way of putting that, but you can tell here her right upper lip looks either swollen or something's wrong with the makeup there. And so that's what makes me wonder a little bit of if, that's, I don't know, if some of those incisions had already started to take, if they'd started those or not, or even just, it could have been just trauma from whatever, had taken place prior.
Yeah. The cross hatching plays a very important part, and we won't get into it now, but it's definitely connected to the surrealism, and it's connected to some Man Ray artwork. Yeah. And I'm gonna be coming out in the near future with some very startling additional.
Okay.
Links, so stay tuned.
Well, you got my email, Steve. So.
and it's really quite shocking. Anyway, there was something else I wanted to say about the
photo.
I guess we pretty much covered most of it. There's so much, there's so many directions on this that it's just like you can talk for 10 hours and still be working at it, But yeah. I think we've covered a lot of the major points. I think that cutting of her mouth is a little bit, it's a lot easy to misinterpret. It looks like it's jagged on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Actually very rounded. And the reason, and you see it as jagged, is they put sutures to close it at the coroner's office.
And I'm seeing those photos post. Okay.
And they've sutured it shut, so it looks like it's more jagged. Actually, when you look at the crime scene, it's perfectly rounded with a scalpel. You can see, so it looks more like the lover's lips than a Glasgow smile. Okay, and that's just one minor point. But basically, the other thing is, maybe just as a final closing thing, it's worth reading that the actual officers from that time period all indicated in their own words that the case was solved.
But look at this. Look, Steve, you're not going to believe me. That's what I've got up next to read. Go for it.
Oh, okay. I'm looking for it here. We'll see if I have it. And basically, well, why don't you read it if you've got it there in front of you?
Yeah. I'm happy to, actually. So this, like he said, this is different officers who have said I think predominantly once some of the more information has come out, but also at the very beginning. That's what's interesting. Yeah, that's what's so interesting to me. Do you want to go for it? You got those right there.
Okay. So Chief of Police Parker says, and these are all private conversations that I was actually able to locate victims who communicated these, and these are all separate statements from high-ranking officers of the time, independent of each other. So Chief Parker says, we identified the Black Dahlia suspect. He was a doctor. And that he told that to Jack Webb of Dragnet fame. They were both drinking buddies. Thad Brown, chief of detectives, one of the real black hats. The Black Dahlia case was solved. He was a doctor who lived on Franklin Avenue in Hollywood. Now, maybe it was another doctor on Franklin, but I don't think so. Jemison, we know who the Black Dahlia killer was. He was a doctor, but we didn't have enough to put him away. Yeah, they did, but he was basically forced to say that. Undersheriff, LA County Undersheriff, the Black Dahlia case was solved, but it'll never come out. Suspect was a doctor they all knew in Hollywood, involved in abortions. So you've got, all of these independent confirmations that.
Oh yeah.
Along with everything else, and there's a lot more indications, but we don't have time to deal with everything. I will say, I came out with a book, my first, I call it historical fiction, and it's my latest publication, and it's Black Dahlia 4. And what I do in that is I wanted to give the victims a voice, and I thought, how am I going to do this? There's no way I said, I know, I'll bring them back and have a trial and have them testify from the other side. So what I did was in this Black Dahlia Avenger 4, I basically had a ghost judge and a ghost prosecutor, and I'm the investigator live. So we've got living and dead from the quick and the dead. And I bring not all of them, but I bring many of the Elizabeth and many of the lone woman murder victims back. I have Jerry Geisler defending George as he did on the incest. George is from the other side, Sexton's from the other side. And it really is, all the evidence is accurate. So I'm presenting real evidence in the Hall of Justice, downtown LA, with all of these ghosts testifying. And I think it really worked out well, because I was able to give all the victims a voice and let them describe what happened as I discovered it in the investigation.
What an interesting take. I like the way Brian is a writer himself, but I like the way you set that up. How did that feel writing historical fiction compared to some of the other stuff that you've written that's been more?
It was interesting. It was the first, and I don't think I'll go ahead and do more fiction, but it was interesting, and it was kind of a unique way for me to be able to present it, and I think it would make a hell of a series or a movie.
Yeah,
it would really be. You got everything in there.
Yeah. I think I know that there had been some deals before, and then things fell through, or COVID or time or whatever, and so. But I definitely think if anybody has the capacity to make something, they've lost their minds if they haven't hopped on this already with you, because it's insane. I mean, I could keep you on here for hours and hours. I won't make you suffer through it. But I'm also not going to lose your email. So you might regret handing that one out to me, but,
I'm happy to do this with the two of you. And, I think we covered a lot of points, not everything, but we got a lot in there. And,
well, listen, we would love to have you back on at any time. So like that, like if you get a new book out, or you just have more information you want to share, please don't forget, just reach out, let us know, because, you do a great job telling the story, and you've done such work here. I did have the picture of, it was one of, I believe this shows a couple of pictures of Elizabeth, but they're tiny, so I don't think it's too bad. But I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is that not a Sexton work there?
That is, it is, and it's basically a confession in many respects.
Yeah. And I don't have the one, again, I'll try to put that on Instagram, but there is another version of this that shows it. It may be something that you compiled, actually, Steve. in different kind of color schemes that would highlight different parts.
Well, that
Because
was from my editor, Robert Sadler in Dallas, Texas, retired Dallas PD. He's my kind of graphic artist and all-time good guy.
okay.
And he did those that you're referring to, and they're very well done. They're on my website, and I try and blog regularly, and I just today did a blog on Sexton and posted it on my blog, so people can read that at stevehodel.com//blog.
Mm-hmm.
I try and keep up to date on the information and present it as it comes out, because this is a never-ending ongoing investigation, and I just can't believe how the doors keep opening on this.
Yeah,
incredible.
It is incredible. Did you have any questions or any? I've been blabbing the whole time.
I did not. I may have to bring him on too.
Okay.
Brian
has his own show as well. It's different. His is not
talk about
crime,
books,
but it's about books or kind of a variety show of sorts. So it can be people with all different backgrounds, all different kinds of things.
Maybe pick his brain too about LAPD doing undercover cases back then and how they were putting microphones in homes and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was a very different department back then, and it was before my time. I was one of Parker's, a new breed, right? We were I thought everything was straight and everything was clean, and I had no idea of this dark history that preceded us,
Mm-hmm.
But you would know the history.
Huh?
I said, but you would know the history to be able to.
Yeah, well, I learned it. I was shocked as things unfolded, and I started to see the real picture. It was like, oh my God, how can this be true?
Yeah.
So a lot of my heroes fell too, and it was.
Yeah, I can imagine that was true.
Parker was my hero, and he was on for 3 years. I went through the Watts riots 1 in '65, and he was still police chief. He died shortly after that.
Oh wow!
3 years.
I saw an interview or a couple, I guess, with Jemison. I think it was Dana Moriarty was the one that he would have been on preceding his death, not too long maybe before, because I believe he was in his 90s, right? I think he was like 94 maybe when he passed away, Jemison. But he was wonderful to listen to as well, and I mean, just as clear and concise about this case, as you've laid it out as well. I mean, up until.
I'm sorry, was there actually? Are you sure it was Jemison? I've never seen a Jemison.
Oh well, then, gosh, you guys talk about something while I look it up because I don't want to get it wrong.
Or send me the link, and I thought
I'm pretty sure it was Dana Moriarty, the reporter. Let me see. And what was Jemison's first name, Stu?
Frank.
That's right.
It might have been Walter Morgan that you're talking about.
It could have been. Because
he was still alive in his 90s, and he's the one that actually broke Jimmy the door at the Franklin house. He was he worked with Jemison. I'll bet that's who it was.
Okay, maybe so. I'm pulling up something.
I'm guessing because it was Walter Morgan. He was, because I interviewed him too, and he was stand-up guy. He was, boy, did he have a lot of secrets he took with him.
Gosh.
He was old school, really old. I mean, he was from that time period working on the case. So I'm pretty sure it must have been Walter Morgan, because he did do a number of interviews.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He
was Jemison's partner, which is, so it's,
yeah,
it's not hearsay or anything. It's from the horse's mouth.
Right. I gotcha.
Yeah. So.
Goodness. Let me see. I don't think I've missed any photos here. I think we've pretty much shown everything. This is one of the ones that you had sent over. It's kind of a cool shot of.
Yeah, I'm there in the white tie in the front row there.
With the mustache.
Whatever happened to that good-looking guy?
You said the white tie with the mustache here in the front.
Yeah.
You know what? I didn't realize you were in that photo when you sent it over. I didn't look at individual faces at all. I was like, oh, that's a cool shot.
I think I have my name underneath it, and
maybe
may have gotten cut off, and yeah. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. And then we've seen. I think I showed a lot of these last week, but yeah, that's Brian's favorite picture.
Yeah, handsome area. He was a character, and
It's that posture.
I just wasn't expecting it last week.
so. Well, it's been fun, guys, and thanks for the invite. And I think we covered a lot of territory. Good.
I think we did as well. So, and I'll shoot you if our listeners have any questions for us, I'll compile them and shoot them over to you. But you guys go back, read his books. I started on one of the books, and then I started reading your FAQs, and then it's like all of the information. So I don't even know where I'm at now, but you guys, you can go to his, like he said, he's got the stevehodel.com/blog, and you can read a lot there. And then all of his books cover, like he said, different parts of the case, different years, new evidence that was uncovered as time went on. So check those out. And yeah, gosh, definitely.
If you see this list behind me, basically Dad started as a teenager and never stopped. So I presented 50 crimes in 50 years, basically. And what the crime signatures are so strong, and they tie each other. I mean, again, those taunting notes and stuff back in the 20s and the 30s, and it's just the handwriting and everything is there. And I'm not saying you did all 50, but I'm saying you decide. You decide which ones you like. But he did a hell of a lot of them, and it's just incredible because. And then he died a rich old man, and anyway, hell of a life. And he made Jack the Ripper look like a pirate.
Oh man!
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! We have a lot of
shift.
Yeah, we made it night shift for real, didn't we? It's Andrea up real late tonight. So we got a lot of people in the comments. Basically, they're thanking you for your time, thanking you for coming on, and really enjoyed hearing what you had to say here. So I guess we can wrap it up. Steve, if you want to, I'm going to put you backstage, and we'll say goodbye to you in 1 second.
All right.
So everybody tell him thank you so much. Like I talked to him like it's a kindergarten class or something. Everybody tell our guests thank you. Okay, we'll see you in 1 second. All right, guys. If you didn't catch all of that, definitely go back. Oh yeah, we don't do it anymore. Hang on. If you didn't catch all of that, definitely go back and listen. Again, that was Steve Hodel. So he was the son of George Hodel, who has, all but been presumed guilty. It's one of those weird cases where now he's gone, so you can't charge anyone. But the evidence is riveting, and he has compiled so much of it. So definitely check out his website, check out his books. And we thank you guys for coming on. As always, we love you guys, and we'll be back around next week with something else, I imagine. Don't you think?
I do.
Hey, would you like to tell everybody good night?
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. All right, guys. Hey, until next week, we will see y'all next Tuesday. Good night, y'all.